This story is a really old Greek story, thousands of years old. It expects you to already know a few things before it even begins. Most people today don't know those things. That's not a spoiler problem, it's just a missing background problem. So before you watch, here's everything you need to know first, laid out in order. No spoilers. Start at the actual beginning. 10 years before this story opens, the Greeks are laying siege to the city of Troy over Helen, the most famous woman in the ancient world, who left her husband for a Trojan prince. The war drags on for a full decade until one man cracks it open, Odysseus. He's the one credited with the idea that finally wins it, using a trick, not brute force. That single detail is the key to understanding him as a character. Odysseus isn't a hero because he's the strongest. He's not. He's a hero because he's clever, and often dishonest, willing to lie and manipulate his way through problems. Ancient Greek audiences didn't see that as a flaw. They had a word for it, metis, cunning intelligence, and they respected it as much as raw strength, maybe more. Hold on to metis. It's the lens for basically everything that happens next. You've probably seen people suggest this. Watch Troy, the 2004 movie, before this one. Let's break down if that's actually a good idea. Troy stars Brad Pitt as Achilles and Sean Bean as Odysseus. It shows the 10 years of war we just talked about, and it ends almost exactly where this story begins, with the wooden horse and the fall of the city. So if you want to actually see that war instead of just hearing about it, Troy does a solid job. But here are two things to know. First, Troy has nothing to do with this new movie. Different studio, different team, no shared story, and Troy leaves out the gods completely. It plays more like a realistic war film. But in the real myth, the gods are involved in almost everything, so Troy is good for the faces and the setting, just not the tone. Bottom line, you don't need to watch it. Everything important is already covered here. But if you've got 2.5 hours free, it's a decent way to get ready. Troy has just fallen. Before we jump into what happens next, here's a quick character guide so none of the names catch you off guard. Odysseus, king of Ithaca and one of the architects of the Trojan War, defined by his cleverness more than his strength. Penelope, his wife, back in Ithaca, keeping the household together during his 10-year absence. Telemachus, their son, an infant when Odysseus left for war, now a young man with little memory of his father. Athena, the goddess who serves as Odysseus's protector and guide throughout the journey, often intervening at pivotal moments. If a mysterious woman appears to offer advice or unexpected help, it's probably her. Antinous, a name that won't mean much at first, but by the end of the story you won't forget it. Circe, a powerful witch goddess who enters the story later. Intelligent, unpredictable, and always worth paying attention to whenever she appears. Argos, Odysseus's old dog, still waiting for him back in Ithaca. He appears only briefly in the original poem, but his scene is one of the most memorable in all of Greek literature. This new adaptation is reportedly giving him a larger role, so don't overlook him. The war is over. From here, 2 separate clocks start running at once, in 2 different places for the same 10 years. Let's take them one at a time, starting with home. On Ithaca, the war ending doesn't bring relief, it brings uncertainty. Odysseus doesn't come back with everyone else. No one knows if he's alive or dead. Penelope is left to hold the household together alone, and as the years stretch on with no word, other men start moving in, uninvited, treating the place like it's already theirs, pressuring her to give up and remarry. Telemachus grows up the entire time without a father, watching this happen in his own home with no power to stop it. That's the pressure sitting under every scene set on Ithaca. Nothing about how it resolves. Just know it's been building for a decade by the time the story properly begins. One more thing worth knowing about Penelope: she isn't written as someone just passively waiting around. She's often described as Odysseus's equal in cleverness, just as capable of strategy and patience as he is. Keep that in mind, watching her scenes. She's not only enduring the situation, she's managing it. Now the other clock, running in parallel the entire time. While all of that is happening at home, Odysseus is trying to close the distance himself, and failing for a decade. The journey home is not a straight line. It's a series of encounters, with monsters, with gods, with temptation, with impossible choices where every option costs something. Some encounters are physical threats, some are seductive, designed to make him want to stop traveling altogether. Some involve forces far more powerful than he is, where brute strength won't help him at all. The through line connecting all of it, a conflict with a god, provoked early on, that follows him the entire way and explains why a trip that should take weeks stretches into years, the same years ticking away back on Ithaca. That's the pattern to watch for. Not what happens in each encounter, just that the type of challenge keeps shifting, and so does the kind of cleverness needed to survive it. Before you go in, 3 concepts the entire genre is built on. Know them and a lot of the story clicks into place on its own. Metis, cunning intelligence, already covered Odysseus's defining traits since the war itself. Every time he solves a problem, ask whether he's doing it with force or with a trick. It's almost always the trick. Xenia, hospitality as a sacred rule. In the ancient Greek world, how you treated a stranger at your door mattered enormously. A guest could be a god in disguise, so turning one away was genuinely dangerous. Watch for who welcomes strangers properly throughout this story, and who doesn't. It's not a background detail, it's a moral scorecard running the entire time. Nostos. Homecoming. It's the actual Greek word the whole genre is named after. And it means more than the physical trip. It's also about whether the people waiting for you still recognize who you've become. Keep that second half in mind, the geography is only half the journey. One more thing that'll change how you watch this. In the original poem, most of the wildest parts of this journey, the monsters, the near misses, all of it aren't shown to us happening in real time. They're told to us by Odysseus, recounting his own trip out loud to a room full of strangers at one of his stops along the way. And remember what we said about him earlier, he's not just clever, he's a legendary liar. So there's a real question built into the structure itself. How much of what you're hearing is exactly what happened, and how much is Odysseus shaping his own story for the room he's telling it to? If this movie uses that same setup, someone recounting events instead of just showing them straight through, that's not a confusing style choice. It's actually in the source material, and it might be part of the point. One more layer, and it's a big one, the gods. 3 matter most for this story. Zeus, king of the gods, acts less like a fighter and more like a referee. He mostly lets things play out, stepping in only at key moments. Poseidon, god of the sea, holds a personal grudge against Odysseus and spends the journey making things harder, not easier. And Athena, goddess of wisdom, is firmly on Odysseus's side, quietly steering events in his favor whenever she can. None of them fight on a battlefield here. They pull strings instead, a storm, a delay, a stroke of luck at exactly the right moment. So if something in this story feels like sheer chance, it's worth asking whether a god had a hand in it. That's usually the real answer. So that's what you need before you go in. Not the ending, just the pieces that make everything else make sense. This story didn't stay in one book. It kept showing up in new places, in new forms, for thousands of years. Star Wars borrows its shape. Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Borrows its plot almost scene for scene. A lot of the movies you already love borrow pieces of it without ever saying so. That's not an accident. It's a big part of why this story is still around today. Let me know in the comments if you want a full video on that.